packing it, baby, to stay in a town. I'm on the edge, time coming down. I get too high, I'm afraid of the ground. I'm young and I'm paid to play with these sounds. Ignoring the call, she shutting that down. Started at the top, and I'm taking it down off the champagne. Took a break from the brown on a rampage. I've been giving it brown. Shawty been solid some time now. On my line for the wine, dine, and I'm with it. Look where we started and look where we at. I can see where we headed, but I can't see me finish. 3 years ago, I was down on my last. Was stuck at the crib, I couldn't get out of my bed. Then I realized it's all in my head, and I can't go back to the past, yeah. Except now I'm moving, put all in the music for more like a movement is brewing. I cannot picture us losing. I'm sharp when I shoot it, the world is my tutor. She wanna lip lock in public, but know that I'm published, we settle for safety. Not in the street, but I'm on the same muscle, that schedule been driving her crazy. They talk like they know me, but know that they bluffing unless it's somebody that pays me. Keep minding your business, the money been printed, my nigga just gotta go get it. I'm in the zone through the winter. I'm trying to see Rome, see Venice. I'm at the summit, I'm thumbing my budget, my nigga. It's nothing, just part of my I need a minute. I know they live it, admit it, I'm teed up. Little baby, she a teaser. Tell her to follow the leader. I put that weight on my shoulder.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unapologetic with Mandrell. Yes, me. Shu Shu has been fired. So all you thirsty dudes out there, let's come up here to lust after my sister and drool all over it. No more of that, okay? Tonight, we have an episode here on something that I notice a lot of people don't practice, nor exercise, nor demonstrate at all in any meaningful way. It's called critical thinking.
Huh?
Yeah, critical thinking.
Huh?
See? Exactly. Perfect reenactment. Perfect. Just kidding also, people. My sister has not been fired. She life is lifing, and she has things to do. And hey, schedule conflict. It happens. So anyway, let's welcome everybody who's in the chat so far. We have 8 people in the chat. We only have 7 likes. Let's get that one more like in, people, if we could. And so for everyone else who's just getting here, let's hit the like button on the way in. Black Man Unfiltered, you're here somehow, some way. Lady Navoa, how you doing? Good to see you. Scam Likely, a.k.a. Dusto, is in the house. And that's a perfect segue to announcing my very special co-host for tonight. Scam Likely of the Dustosphere.
What's going on, people? How's it going?
Right.
It's going to be rough because we're going to actually try to challenge people to think, and you're probably not going to do it. So we're going to have some problems.
Just so not. Then look, they're going to see the title of the thumbnail and just not even click on it. Watch. Look, we got 8 people. We got like 8 people in here right now. Watch. We're probably not going to go get over 12 people. We might get 12 people tonight to watch live. People don't want to learn, dude. I don't understand it. People don't want to do better.
It's cool. I mean, it's going to have to troll them. I mean, it is what it is. I have to troll them.
Yeah. And so, Scam Likely. All right, the definition. I thought we'd lead with the definition of critical thinking. Okay, critical thinking is the objective analysis and evaluation of an issue in order to form a judgment. Okay, I think the key words in this is the objective analysis. You have to be objective and analyze, which means you have to take math, for instance. You can't solve an equation unless you have all the variables. What people tend to do is to hear a topic or hear a subject and draw an instantaneous conclusion. And these conclusions are generally based on their own personal past experiences and things like encounters with other people. Right?
Are you telling me that people are doing this?
Doing it all the time.
Hold on. It got to be the women. It's the women's, right? All the modern women is doing this, right? It's not the men.
Yeah, it's the men. And the men are the worst.
You're telling me the men? Come on now.
Sir. Right. Here's one for objective me using critical thinking, because I've actually finally put real thought into this whole manosphere, red pill BS. And here's the conclusion I drew. I've drawn so far, right? It's not done with my analysis, but so far it is 100% the men's fault. There's blame to go on both sides. There is blame to go, but who's responsible? Whose fault it actually is? It's the men. Well, the women took the welfare money. Why didn't you tell them that? Hold up. Why didn't you tell them not to?
What about the women?
Right. You left them with no choice. Men, we left them with no choice. Okay, so if we're not taking relationships and marriage seriously, this is way back in the day. And this starts from back in the day because I saw a conversation that was in the 1960s, right? 1967. And there's a room full of black people, black men and black women. And they were having a conversation about relationships and dating and stuff like that.
Hold on, that's too much information. Hold on. Whoa, 1967, red and black supremacy.
Here's the thing. It was the same talking points. It was the same questions, the same answers. This is from 1967.
Oh, but what about the women's?
Right. And like people blame women. You can't blame women. They're not responsible for it. We are. And then we like to say that we're leaders. Now, here's the thing. Everyone falls short of this, including myself. Listen, like I do a series called Tenets of Manhood, right? And what I'm doing with that is, and I talk about stoicism. These are things you should practice every day to try to become a better person, try to become a better man. You're not going to get it right every day. You're not. You're going to fall short sometimes on some things. You're human. We all are, myself included. I fall short a lot. But I don't let it get me down. I get up the next day and I try again. And I think everyone should try to do that. You know, you're going to get, sometimes swing and a miss. We all fall short. But here's the thing. You can manage things a lot better with critical thinking. It seems like that seems to be something that's lost on a lot of people. I just sit back and watch for the most part these days, man. I mean, there's not a lot to be said. Men don't want to take responsibility for what's happened, and we should because we're the ones responsible. Like I said, there's plenty of blame to go on both sides. Blame is different from responsibility. So critical thinking, the objective analysis and evaluation of an issue in order to form a judgment. What do you think?
Objective analysis. That means you have to stop and you have to do this L word. What's the L word that you might have to stop to do to get data?
Listen.
Oh, man, my chest hurts. Say that word again.
Listen.
So that means when somebody's talking, just overpowering systematic oppression, redlining, it's the women's fault, feminism, blackity black, you women's modern women. Being emotional, it means you have to hear what they have to say.
Yeah, you do.
Somewhat fully and thoroughly.
We do. And again, we all fall short of it, myself included.
And would it be fair to say there's something going deeper than just regular listening? I kind of think that when it comes to listening, there's types of listening. When I was talking about communication, there's listening to respond. There's first of all, just ain't listening. There's just listening to respond. And people know. Then there's listening to understand. And attached to one they don't talk about is actually feeling what's being said. That's when you understand where someone's really coming from, how they feel when they say what they say. People keep discrediting emotions. This world runs off of emotion. Get over it. Why did they say what they say? Why do they feel the way that they do? And why are they saying what they say? How do they feel when they're saying what they say? Because that can dictate how you respond and how you might actually get them to understand what you're trying to say. This is just basic conversation. We ain't even talking data. But then on the logical side, you have to evaluate. We just talking about the first part of critical thinking. The first part of the first part. I'm just saying.
Yeah. critical thinking is something that I do. That is something that I actually do a lot. Oftentimes I get told I do too much of it because it makes you a very practical person. And so say I'm talking to someone, right? And I'm listening to what they say. And let's say everything that they say is positive. I have a habit of taking in what they're saying and looking at not only the positive, but okay, I hear the positive parts. Now, what can go wrong with this? How can this go? What are the negative aspects of this, right? It's just me exercising critical thinking. However, when I articulate this, it comes out as me being negative. And it's totally understandable, but I think people are so out of practice with it that receiving it and understanding what it is when they hear it can be difficult or can be a challenge. You know what I'm saying?
I'll say this too. When it comes to critical thinking, emotions are critical.
Yeah, they are.
Let me say that one more time. Emotions are critical. It's a part of critical thinking. It might not be documented, but it's felt and it's heard. Emotions are critical.
Yeah, and so is articulation, because being articulate is a part of problem solving portion of critical thinking. Being able to properly articulate yourself, and that's the issue that I struggle with, and I struggle hard with it. I do. It's one of the biggest challenges of my life to properly articulate what I'm thinking and how I'm feeling. You know what I mean? Because you could have the best intentions in the world, but if you can't properly articulate it, it comes off raw and wrong. You know what I'm saying? You could try to say Merry Christmas to someone, but if you articulate it wrong, Merry fucking Christmas. That doesn't come off too pleasant. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So right, that's going to be a problem, you know, and a problem you're going to have to solve. So, but then you take that short example I gave you right there of just articulating yourself properly. You know, you need to use critical thinking, even just to dissect that situation to find out what the root cause is, so that you won't do it anymore. You know,
find out the root cause.
Yeah, that's what critical thinking is, in my opinion, best suited to be used for, to find out the root cause. Because once you find the root cause, now you can solve for the overall problem. And you can solve for other subsequent problems that branched off of the root cause as well.
I see people more just looking at the problem. And then
hitting it with a hammer, dude. You can't do that. It's not going to work, man. Here's my thing. If you're a critical thinker, your thinking should be thoughtfully reasoned. It should be thoughtfully reasoned consideration, not reflexive, quick, and unthinking judgment. That's something I wrote here in my notes. If you're a critical thinker, your thinking should be thoughtfully reasoned consideration and not reflexive, quick, unthinking judgment. And that's something that I think the vast majority of people, period, do. And as a lot of people in our Western culture, we're not taught to do much else. People say, hey, you got to think quick, think quick. That's not what this means, though. You know what I mean? Not everything calls for that. You know, most things you should dissect and try to find out what the root cause is. That way you can solve the problem at its core. And you probably won't ever have to deal with that again.
Question.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think people are not critical thinkers?
I think it's because a lot of people they just want results, and they want them as quick, as swiftly as humanly possible. You know, they just want the problems to go away. And it has to go back to what you're saying, feelings. When there's a problem, problems don't make people feel good, and they want the negative feelings to go away. So if they can find a quick way to just take an issue, hit it with a sledgehammer, as you like to say, and if that gets it done, even temporarily, they'll take it, as opposed to going through the growing pains of properly dissecting the issue and solving for the root cause. That way, you probably never have to deal with that problem again.
Good answer. As I say, if people pick and choose what the problem is based on how they feel and what they're willing to accept and willing to deal with. Some do it naturally, some do it. Some people do it because they're wired that way. Some people do it out of choice. A lot of people don't want to do the work, or a lot of people fear consequence and fear challenge, fear authority, fear, confrontation, fear a challenge. So the easy thing is swing the sledgehammer or run to the problem or deflect. It's not my problem, it's their problem, it's their fault. I didn't do what they did. We see if it wasn't this, if it could have this. If it was for the men's, if it was for the women's. Versus saying, hey, did that solve the problem? Or are you going to have the same conversation tomorrow?
Or 60 years from now, like we're doing right now. We're doing right now, dude. Like I said, that conversation was from 1967. And the guys were saying the same thing. The women were saying the same thing. And I'm just like, oh my God. And see, and me making this discovery was because I actually looked at this whole situation and I began to dissect it. How far back does this go? You know?
How far will it go?
How far has it gone? And now, how far will it go? I mean, because again, that video was from 1967. I mean, unreal. The same exact talking points, the same exact questions, the same exact answers. It was like watching YouTube present day. It really was. I was like, wow, we have not moved anywhere. And so no wonder, if that's a situation that men have put women in, a period of 50 years of stagnation, of being static in one space. No wonder women raise their girls to say, hey, listen, make sure you go to college, get a good job, so that way you don't have to depend on a man. The men weren't moving anyone anywhere. We weren't leading. How do I blame women for telling their girls to do it? Hey, don't depend on them. They're unreliable.
Yeah, my point, I even said it earlier on the dust panel. If everything was so perfect in 1961 and we were made at this 80-90% rate, why didn't it go up to 95, 97, and 99? Why did it drop to 20 and 30%?
Exactly. The marriage rate dropped. Now, and granted, I don't discount that we had a lot of help in our dysfunction and our demise. The American government had played a huge part in that. They did. They played a huge hand in that. However, the reason why I say we're responsible is because we did have options. As leaders, we could have said, no, we're not going to take the state's money or the state's aid. We're going to buckle down, grind it out, get it out the mud. It'll be painful for a while, but at least we got it on our own and we'll be together. You know? And so that's the thing. There's an option, but where's the critical thinking? You know what I'm saying? It seems, I wasn't there. I was nowhere near alive in that time. But the way it seems like, hey, this is an option. Yeah, we'll have to live apart, but at least you get money and I'll send you money too. Yeah, but
I can't speak to it.
Yeah, it's just speculation. It's just me speculating.
My thing is, I heard the narrative. They grabbed threw the black men. No one knocked on my grandfather. 2 grandfathers.
Mm-hmm.
No one knocked on their doors and said you had to leave.
Yeah.
No one knocked on my father's door. 3 kids. Nobody knocked on the door and said you got to leave. And there's no way that he would have looked at me. I'm 4 or 5 years old. Kids playing in the backyard. Oh, well, you're right. No. I guess I got to go something. No.
Yeah, and the thing, what we said, they didn't ask them to leave.
I'm talking about the narrative.
The narrative, yeah. That's what I'm talking about. also the narrative that because you look at some women in this space and they're like, well, the men didn't do this and they didn't do that. Okay, they didn't. That's true. You can't deny it. I mean, you can't deny it. How did the marriage rate fall so low? Another thing is, okay, where did this whole speech to young girls come from? Again, this is just an example of me using critical thinking. Now, I'm not done, so I haven't reached an actual conclusion yet. These are just what my findings are so far. And according to my findings so far, this is where my answer is leaning. So far the answer is on a spectrum. It's not finite yet. But it is, I think it's worth dissecting. I think everyone should try it and see what you guys come up with. Like, again, there's blame on both sides. There really is. There are bad decisions made on both sides, and there are good decisions made on both sides. Okay, so that's kind of a wash. As to who's to blame? Both of us, both men and women. Who's responsible? The men, because you are to be in a position of leadership. And we got to eat that. That's something that we do. Bottom line, I mean, that's the responsibility behind it. It doesn't always feel good. Sometimes we make, and myself included, we make decisions that are counterintuitive and they're not sound decisions. Sometimes we make, and they work against our own interests. But at the same time, you may not see it at the time, but hey, no one's perfect. And so, all right.
Black man. Yeah, Black man, it's your show. Come up whenever you want.
Come up for a second. Hold on a second. Yeah. Now, defining a problem. Here's some steps I jotted down just as far as how do you define a problem? Okay, you see an issue. Is the issue clear? Is there a clear problem here? Okay, now what do I know about this problem? What do I not know about the problem? What information do I still need? And what is the context? These are the things you need to properly identify and dissect a problem. These are steps of critical thinking that I think everyone should try to use or try to practice to actually find real actionable conclusions. You know, this is something that I'm using now in the business that I'm doing. So anytime you're in sales or anything like that, or you deal with people, period, what you should try to do is solve a problem, because that's what people want you to do. They want you to solve a problem for them. Like, I can't tell people, okay, do this and eat that, do this and eat that, and then you'll lose weight. Well, losing weight may not be the issue. So I ask people, why do you want to lose weight? Why do you want to start working out? What inspired you to do so? What was the wake-up call? You know what I mean? Why are you on this weight loss journey? And they tell me. And so when they tell me what it is, I'm like, okay, 9 times out of 10 so far, I'm like, that's it right there. That's the overall problem. So now I found, and so when I do that, now I'm solving for that. The weight loss, that's a part of it. I made now like trying to inspire people, trying to keep their spirits up, the morale. And it goes back to what you said again, the way they feel. Goes back to the way they feel, man. People want to feel good. You can't blame them.
I mean, I don't discredit feelings, but another problem, people who have relationship problems, men against women. Let's take the crustosphere, for example, or scamosphere.
Crustosphere, scamosphere.
The men have problems with women.
Okay.
And let's be real. I'm 42 and I'm single, so I'm not going to sit here and say I'm Johnny Womanizer.
Right. I'm 44 and I'm single.
I'm single, but
I mean, you know,
ain't them problem. I ain't got those, but there's a problem with women, so they come in looking for an answer. And evaluating the problem. Okay, problem with women. They go over there and they tell you to go get the bag, get the money. Then they tell you all the women is the women. Then you see the problem multiplied times 3 2 years later. Meaning, obviously, it didn't get solved. Obviously, the solutions don't work. So when's the time to go back to the table and say, what's the problem? Like, what were we really doing? And I talk about problem solving. Part of critical thinking is for problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
5 things. There's extra stuff to it, but I'll just keep it simple. Number 1, identify the problem. That's 90% of it, and that's where most people fail. Because they're not actually solving the problem, they're solving the other problem or creating another problem.
They're solving a symptom.
Or they're not even, what they're actually doing is not even solving a symptom because they did not identify what the actual problem was. They're just reacting. This happened, react. This happened, react. Just moving. Another thing, after you identify what the real problem is, you gather information. Yes, you can now say, okay, well, what's this? What's this? Why did it happen? When did it happen? Where? Why?
Yeah.
Who's involved? What's really going on?
In other words, what do I know?
Yeah. What's really going on?
Ask yourself, what do I know next? Ask yourself, what do I not know?
Then generate possible solutions.
Mm-hmm.
I could do this. I could do some of that. I tried some of this there, some of that there, some of this there, some of that there. Then step 4 is select a solution. At the end of the day, you got to make a decision. This is to the men. Make a decision. You got to live with it. Yeah. Step 5 is evaluate. After you made your decision, sit back, how did it work and did it work? You are allowed to make mistakes. If you're allowed to make a decision, you're allowed to make a mistake.
Yeah.
But evaluation is where you learn. Let's be real. If I'm 42 and single, that means I made some mistakes. 22, 26, 28, 31, 33. Let me look back and make sure that at 42, I'll be 43 soon, that I'm not the same person I was at 28. Evaluate. Looking at the possible solutions, gathering information. I still do this stuff. Not just relationship, but just life, everything. Okay, where did I go wrong with this? What happened here? And I'm still always, believe it or not, as much junk as I talk on these panels, I actually want to learn. I want to actually be wrong. Then I can go back. Okay, I'm wrong. What's the problem? All right, with information, I can hear something different. Then I can, all right, well, what if this, what if that, what if that? Then I can pick a solution. Let me see what happens if we do this. And I can go back and evaluate, try it all over again. Like trolling. I started trolling. It's pretty fun. It's pretty cool. Some reactions I like, some I don't. So I went to the troll master, J Speed. Learned a few things. Let me try this. Hey, this works. Then I opened a whole new doors to trolling from actually listening and observing behavior. What if this? Oh, this is why they're doing this. Now I know how to push the button. Now I know how to bring it back home. Now I know how to hit them with the fake troll and then just let them go. And then really, I mean, it's an art, but it takes some work.
It is. And it also affects you like
learning.
It also affects you like, take veterans, for instance, right? Like myself and you and myself, like, for example, like when I'm around my brothers in arms, right? I can't be that same guy if I'm with like regular people, like my same sense of humor I have with them. I can't bring that to civilians because it just doesn't mix. Look, I've tried it, doesn't work, doesn't. So I was like, okay, I have to do something about this. This doesn't mix. It doesn't mesh. You know what I'm saying? You can bring it to the civilian world if you want to, but the cost is too high. And it's going to cost you. It comes at an unspeakably high price. Unspeakably high price. And I'm saying to the fellas, like, before it gets to that point, if you are a veteran out there, get some therapy, get the help you need, work on it, and actually do the work. Because that price is not something you want to pay. It really isn't. You know what I'm saying? Get it before it gets to that point. Because you don't know how other people are going to take it or view it. You just don't know how the other person is going to respond. But critical thinking. Like I have some in my notes here. I mean, consider all possibilities, like you said. Like I'll listen to you. Listen, our list is largely the same. When it's just gathering and interpreting information. And keep in mind, people, he and I have not had a conversation about this before the show, like at all. Consider all possibilities, think it through, evaluate your plan. Why is this plan best? Is there more than one right answer? And what are the consequences? Because sometimes there is more than one right answer. You know?
Yeah, I got one more thing to add when I talk about why people don't critically think. A lot of people either were programmed not to, you're taught to follow orders, or had it beat out of them.
It's the whole do as I say, not as I do thing. That's the link I made with that. The reason why our boys, right?
Critical thinking beat out of you,
right? That's when it comes to this whole thing. That's one of the conclusions that I've drawn. That's a huge contributor of it. When you're raising kids, like, no, you do what I say. But Daddy, you do this. I don't care what you see me do. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't care what you see me do. You do what I say.
Yeah,
do what I say. Notice I do. That environment
restricts critical thinking.
It does.
Because you can't ask questions and get answers. And
right. And you can't breed leaders you can't groom leaders that way. You have to allow kids to be curious. You have to allow them to ask questions. And you yourself, that means that you yourself have to be held accountable to your own actions.
I have a question.
Okay, Black Men Unfiltered is here. Well, let's welcome Black Men Unfiltered for the third time ever on Unapologetic. Black Men Unfiltered, ladies and gentlemen. What do you have for us?
I think that back in the day, I have a few points that you guys could. I think back in the day, the critical thinking back in the day with children, I think children could have learned a lot if they were allowed to do critical thinking back when you like 60s, 70s, 50s, whatever. They should have been able to have critical thinking because the children are more under control. I think you could say they were listeners then. They listened, right? They didn't have any distractions, no phones, no internet, no orange sites, none of that. It was just go walk to school on a gravel road, walk home, go pick cotton, churn butter, go in the house, right? So or play outside, climb trees, right? They didn't have a lot. So I think critical thinking then would have been great. Could have been innovative for children then. But I do believe now, oh Lord, when it comes to critical thinking, some children can critically think. But man, Dustin, I know you were in the education field.
Mm-hmm.
I just, because I'm a part of my children when they go to school or whatever. I'm part of the PTA. Me and my wife, we're part of that. And they just gave us numbers on how many kids are suffering from mental illness, ADHD, dyslexia. Like the numbers are so astronomical, guys. My wife couldn't even believe it. My wife said, "Baby, look at all these babies that are sick. Like, I mean, not sick, but are struggling with some type of mental disorder."
Okay. Yeah, that's true.
And it's a lot. I mean, they got classes, Mandrell. When next time you come here, I'm going to take you up there and let you see. All right? They got classes there that are, the school is one huge, beautiful school. But in the back, they have these little 10 buildings. There's like 40 of them. And they're all, and I think each one of those buildings can hold probably 20, 30 children, maybe. Right? And they're all full of children. And they call it the dyslexia lane. They got a row of them, dyslexia, a row of them for ADHD kids, a row of them from other kids that did. I mean, all of them are packed, Mandrell. They packed with kids. They can't go to school with the regular kids. And so my question is, like, how do we get those beautiful babies? Because I love them. I do. I don't have nothing bad to say about no babies. How do we get those babies to critically think when they can't be still? They can't sit still. They got to be up running around. They got to constantly be watched. They got dyslexia. So, sometimes, with dyslexia children, they do everything in reverse.
Okay, I
right?
got you.
So what do you do? How do you handle those? My question to you guys is, how do you handle those children who can't critically think and they're becoming adults or young men or young women?
I can give you some factors. And all it's gonna do is open your mind more and make it worse.
Yeah, because what I'm gonna tell you is gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna what I got to say is just gonna open your mind.
It's gonna be worse, but I can tell you.
Go ahead, Dusto.
Okay, people are programs. That's what they are mostly, and then they have their personalities and whatever. Add to that program politics, add big pharmacy, add more politics, because education is political, education is financial, education is political again.
Big pharma. Woo. I didn't think he was gonna say that, brother.
Add environment, add bad food, add bad health, add bad mental health, add bad parenting, add social media, add all these things to that program. And what do you think you're going to get as an outcome? And these people also have feelings. Their environment is their environment. And also put the teachers in a hostile environment and pressure them to death, not to educate the kids, but to get the scores.
Yeah, exactly, bro. You're absolutely correct.
What are your expectations?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, brother.
Yeah, there's no effort being put into making these kids better.
No, they push them. Yeah, they push them for the ending test. The test at the end of the year, they're only pushing them to pass that because they know they get more funding, they get raises, and it's all dependent upon them passing the test at the end of the year. They don't give a damn about basic stuff during the year. They don't.
Some do, some don't. But you put them in that environment. Same thing. I don't understand everything with policing, but I can understand some of it based on how education worked when I was a teacher. Go sit in that seat with that teacher. Take a teacher to lunch and talk to him for 30 minutes. You'll find out what's really going on.
Right.
But it's not as simple as what you think. But 90% has to do with parenting.
I was going to say that, like, my answer to that, black man, was going to be those kids can critically think. In fact, they're actively doing it as they're bouncing around places. They're trying to figure things out. They're asking questions. Why does this work that way? Hey, the candle is bright and it's on fire. Why? Now that normally gets on a parent's nerve. I've seen it get on parents' nerves. Like when I was a kid growing up, I used to ask why a lot, and he used to drive my mother up the walls. You know what I'm saying? Like no, because she's the type where do what I say, when I say, how I say, blah blah. You know what I'm saying? If not, you know, there comes the ass whooping, right? But she learned to appreciate it. She's like my dad was like, at least he's asking questions. He needs to ask why. Just answer it. You know what I mean? So then when you have kids who are acting out like that, you can. It just takes. Some kids is going to take more work for them than others. But as kids, as parents, and again, I'm not a parent, so I don't presume to know. I'm on the outside looking in on this issue.
Okay.
So this is just from my observation. So with some kids, you're going to have to give them more attention, one-on-one attention with certain topics and certain things than others. Like when it comes to critical thinking, you might have to present something to them. Like, okay, there's a cup, and you suck the liquid out with a straw. You know why that is? Like run drills with them like that. Simple. It can start with something simple. You know what I'm saying? And they got books on critical thinking for children. Just go to Barnes & Noble or Books A Million and work with your child.
Now, let me say this. Dusto had a great point. He says about environment. And I believe, this is just me saying this, I think it would be great I think we stunt the growth of children's minds when we put them in the position of the kids back in the day. Now, back in the day, they had classrooms set up in order, sitting in a line behind each other, because that's how they work. That's how they wanted kids to be, because they wanted the kids to graduate. And there wasn't no college in mind, right? They wanted them to go to the plants. They wanted them to work in those type of fields, the factory workers, right? And they knew that if they trained them to do a certain thing in the factory, right, work or seating them, or how they go to lunch, and then when the bell rings, they move to a different area. Like they taught them about lunch break. Like they built them mentally. I think that critical thinking for children in school should be free. I don't think a child should have to sit in a classroom for it. These kids right now are more mentally advanced than we ever were. Well, I don't think they should sit in the class all for an hour and a half, listen to a teacher talk. I think they should be up, active, moving, thinking, talking. You know, let's go over this. Let's use examples. Let's use our hands. Let's use, like let them be more open. That's why when Elon Musk opened that school, he said there will not be any desk in any classroom here. Everybody here will be open-minded to move and use their brain and understanding, build things, learn different things. You know, we're not going to waste our time doing things that don't matter.
Black man, this is a capitalistic world. It's not going to change.
No, and understand, like
basketball, but I put it this way: sports. They put a football on the field, and there's 100 yards, 50 yards that way, 50 that way. Biggest, strongest, fastest win. The rest of y'all get the hell up off the field.
Yep.
That's how this world is going to be. It's not going to change.
And understand the not the contrast, but the similarities between how kids operate are moved in schools, how they're moved in prisons, and how they move on jobs like factory jobs. It's all uniform. You go to work at this time, you go to school at that time, you go to lunch at that time, and then look at the lunchrooms, they all look the same.
Yep.
Factories, prisons, and schools, they all look the same. Okay. Exactly. So we teach kids in schools to be drones, to be workers, and it worked for a lot of times. And for our people, Black people, when it came to the do as I say, not as I do thing, I think
Mandrell, you said it worked.
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Making drones?
No, I'm talking about the people were groomed to go in the factory and do this.
Oh,
did it really work?
To be uniform, to be uniform and to get a job.
Or you're not talking about that as a whole. You're just talking about just them doing that one thing.
Right. Yeah, I'm not talking about it as a whole. No. You know what I'm saying? I think those lessons that our parents taught us as far as not being critical thinkers, number one, they didn't know how to, and it's because they weren't taught to it themselves. And that came out of fear. People are afraid of that. They just wanted their kids to be safe. So they raised them just go get a job at this factory, work 20 years, retire. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And then they taught their kids the same thing. And so that the next generation taught their kids the same thing. It was the safest route. And it was the path of least resistance. And their kids also had jobs and they could support a family if they take this streamlined route. And it served the overall goal of the industry as well, because now plants and factories had no shortage of just regular workers. You know what I mean? So it all ties in.
Right now,
it all ties in. So the whole, and again, this is not an indictment against our people, against our parents. It's what they knew, it's what they were taught, and it was the path of least resistance, and they were looking out for their kids' safety. That's why they took that route.
Because that's what they were taught.
And also because they were taught. Yeah, it was what they were taught.
And so I watched I think it was on PBS. My son came and got me. Jacoby, he's a nerd, but I love him to death. And I watched this documentary with him until he fell asleep. God bless his heart. Anyway, so we watched it. There was this Black guy, very old. I think he's in his 80s now. He's probably 89, 90 almost. And he was telling a story about he went to school and went to the first integrated college where they allow Black people to go to college with white people. And he got his degree, his master's or his doctorate in chemical engineering, I think it was. And so when he got chemical engineering, he graduated, right? First person in his family to graduate, happy, ready to go into the workforce, make great money. He went to a few factories. They wouldn't hire him because you know why. And then he went to the last factory and they did hire him. So he went home and told his wife. And he said the next day he walked in and he broke down crying in the middle of the interview. The next day he walked in, he's ready to get to work on chemical engineering at this big old huge plant. And the guy that ran the plant told him, where are you going? He said, I'm going to do my job. He said, no. He said, you must be mistaken. We didn't hire you for chemical engineering. We hired you to be a janitor. And he said he had to work there as a janitor to support his family for 7 years. And he said he would go to other places, other interviews. And they wouldn't hire him. And he just got so discouraged. And one day he went, the guy that hired him passed away, died. They had another guy came in who was a good guy, right? And he allowed him to be a chemical engineer. He allowed him to do what he went to school to do. And it took 7 years. He graduated. It took him 7 years to get that job because of the color of his skin. So when we talk about the ceiling for some of those men like that who went to school, did the work, wasn't lazy, didn't lay up. They did the work. They dealt with a whole bunch of, because like he said, a lot of stuff that he dealt with in college, where people write nigger on his door, pissing in his clothes in the dorm rooms, like all type of nasty shit. And he said he dealt with it and he put a smile on his face because he knew he was going to be the first man in his family to graduate, first man to earn that kind of money. And he dealt with it and then got out and had to wait another 7 years.
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying, where you're going. The hardships. Yeah, black men did work hard back then, and they had to deal with a lot more stuff. However, one thing really has nothing to do with the other in this situation, because you still could have taught your kids critically thinking, and that would have gotten us off of the mainstream railroad of thinking one way. Right. That this is the way to do it. This is the path to success.
Right.
Because I've even seen that in my mother before, like growing up. Like when she recommended I do something, like do a job or whatever, or even getting a degree in something, it was something basic. And I was like, I don't want to do that. You know what I'm saying? And she's well, why don't you do this? And it'd be a lot easier. I'm like, I don't, that ain't me. You know what I'm saying? Like even in the army, why would you choose to do that? This is what I want to do. She wanted me to take something easy where I didn't deploy, I wasn't in danger, things like that. And again, because of critically thinking, I could have just gotten pissed off because that was the ideal she had for me and everything, and she was trying to push me into a life of mediocrity. However, she was just looking for me to be safe. She didn't mean anything by it.
Right.
She just didn't want me in harm's way. However, like my grandmother, my grandmother told her, right. Well, he's always been like that. Why are you surprised? She's like, why are you surprised now?
Right.
Like,
she was trying to protect you from something that didn't exist anymore.
Exactly. You know, and my grandmother's like, don't you remember when he was a boy, he used to jump off the roof and stuff? I used to take plastic bags from grocery stores, you know, and put my arms through the little hand holes and jump out of a tree, jump off the roof of a house. Yeah, I was always jump off the bed and all kind of crazy daredevil stuff I would do. Roller coasters, skateboards, didn't matter if it was what you call death-defying, I would do it. I would try it. So my mother was scared to death. And again,
I'm about to rock out, but dude, you broke your number. You said 13. We're up to 21 now. So good job.
Oh, thank you.
Salute.
Thank you.
All right, man. Love you guys.
Thanks everybody for coming. All right, man. Take it easy. All right. So we just dropped the link. So if anyone else want to come up and talk to us about this, you're free to do so. In fact, come on up. CBN's Tech Talk. Anyone other than Black David, you're welcome to stay up here, please. But I mean, you know, we get the usual suspects every single time. So my thing is critical thinking, people. It is, to me, something that we all should be teaching, not only our kids, but ourselves, practicing these things. Again, some practices Dusto and I just went over earlier tonight on how to practice critical thinking. When you face with an issue, do you know what the issue is? Like my answer for that was, is it clear? Are you clear on what the issue is? What do I do? And when you're clear on what the issue is, ask yourself, what do I know? After that, ask yourself now, what do I not know? Then ask yourself, what information do I still need? And what are the consequences? What are the consequences depending on what you do? And if you stand there and do nothing, what are the consequences going to be? For example, you could be in a situation where someone's telling you, hey, you have a nasty habit of doing X, Y, and Z. Okay. You can either choose to properly identify what habits this person's talking about and actually put in work to fix those habits and get rid of them. Or you can stand there and do nothing and keep the habits and see where that gets you.
The trolls are going to get you if you do that.
Right. You know what I'm saying? And here's the thing. You don't want to move too late, because even moving too late is an issue. You know, I'm not saying rush your decisions. No, but if someone brings it to your attention that you're doing something that is not cool or it makes them feel a certain kind of way, don't hesitate on that. Get to it. Because waiting too late or not doing anything at all, those have consequences too. And you're not going to like them. at all.
The trolls are gonna get you.
Yeah, the trolls are gonna get you.
What's going on, Black David?
I'm doing good. Listening to the conversation, and it got me thinking.
Critically thinking or just thinking?
Deep critical thinking, because the first came to my mind is the school system. What if the school we put our kid into is not what our kid going into? What is the curriculum that's completely outdated, but they don't want to update it because they want to prevent us from going to the next level? Why are we telling our kid to the type of school system when there's other alternative out there? Those are the thoughts that come to my mind because I had the conversation last night after the show we produced with White School Podcast, and these something that stood out in my mind.
I got some critical questions for you.
Go ahead.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Number one, what is the problem?
The problem is we have a system that kind of like pushing our kids back, but not challenging them to go to the next level.
Okay, the problem is the system. What part are you trying to solve? What's the thing that you're trying to get? What result do you want in the end?
To create an environment that allows the child to think to the next level, to not only critical think, but to analyze as well, figure things out on a faster pace.
Are you talking about all kids or are you talking about your kids?
I'm referring to all kids.
That's
the way I'm saying that because I was given a privilege to go to school to two different worlds. I go to school in the U.S. educational system. I went to school in the Nigerian educational system. I saw a huge contrast between both. Here, it's more like it's systematic. They expect you to learn one kind of thing, but not trying to branch out to something deeper. But over there, it challenged me to pick a path that would fit me best. Either be science, either be technical, either commercial or art. But what it does, it challenges you to see how far you can go.
Well, what are some of the root causes of the problems of the system? Why is the school the way that it is?
I think lack of creativity, lack of thinking outside the box.
No, I'm talking about the system part.
That's what I'm referring to here. Because what I'm seeing, it's not as if they want to challenge the kids or see they can think beyond their limit. To me, it is like you don't really care. You're just trying to create a system so you can have what you're looking for as long as they don't go beyond the meaning.
Hey, Grant, show you. Hey, hold on. Grant, show you. Oh, there we go. You can go back off camera you want.
Okay, and also, Black David, here's the thing: you can't count on the government or the school system to teach your kids to think critically. That's counterproductive. That's
where I was heading.
Yeah, that's counterproductive. Here's the thing: listen, a healthy, educated, and confident nation is harder to govern than one that is demoralized, poor, and most people think that it's best to just take orders and hope for the best. Very few people are going to stand out and ask questions. Very few people are even going to stand out even further than them and not only ask questions, but solve for them, find solutions. You know what I mean? So I understand you want things to be better for all children, but the best thing you can do, in my opinion, and again, I'm not a parent, so I'm on the outside looking in, is start with your own and take time with them yourself and teach them how to think critically. It starts at home. Create an environment where they can think critically. They can wonder about things. They can ask questions and teach them how to find answers and solve for the entire problem as opposed to problem, fix, problem, fix. They're fixing them, but they're not finding solutions. A fix can be broken. A solution is a solution.
Yeah, I was going to say in identifying a problem.
Yeah.
Gathering information in those two stages. If the problem is an entire system, unless you're up there with MLK and Jesus, one man can't go and fix that problem. It's unrealistic. Just like when people ask me on a dust panel, what are you going to do about police brutality? like I'm gonna hit a switch and control every police officer from here to the West
Right.
Coast. It's unrealistic. But you can solve what you can solve, and the rest is going to be what it is. But the factors of the problem have to do with, like I said, politics, cash, capitalism, big pharma, food, family structure. All these are problems that you can't solve. You can't go and be a father and a doctor in every one of these households.
Yeah. And it ties into some things I've done in the episodes on Stoicism. You have to focus on what you can control.
Yes.
So if you have an issue, figure out what you can. A part of finding out what the issue is and trying to find a solution is figure out what parts of this that are under your control, things that you can personally do something about, and focus on that. Jay Takashi, what's up?
Hey man, I got a lot to speak to about this. First, I want to say something real quick. This game is giving me a heart attack. And I got my kettlebell here in me in my room, 30 pounds. So yeah, I'm putting in the work, man. I'm doing twists now. So yeah. So I want to give you an update on that, man, Joe. So like I said, I'm seeing some changes. So that's good. But when it comes to critical thinking, brother, let me say this. I've always said everybody should be persuaded, because I remember in college we talked about this. Everybody should be persuaded to take a logic and persuasion class. And the reason why I'm going to say that is because some people don't know how to think by themselves. Like, it's not even knowing how to think, it's knowing what to think. Like, because like I say, some people have been taught how to critique, some people have been taught how to analyze, and also have been given the opportunity to think for themselves. But like what you said, not everybody has that. What Scam Likely has said, and you said, like, nobody has given that opportunity. Sometimes we were told, like, yo, just listen and don't think, boy. Just, like I said, just jump. When I tell you to jump, don't think, just jump. But you gotta remember that comes from a hierarchy dynamic, because whenever you're a parent, like whenever you and me become parents, or Dustin becomes a parent, because I know we're not gonna restrict our kids in a way that we will, but it's gotta be like, listen, son, you gotta get on board my program over here. When you up and out of the house, that's when you can start thinking for yourself. But I will say this: being in highly educated schools, if you are an academics, I want to say, like, let's say your child's autism, they figure out different things, not the normal way, but just figuring things out like their own way. That is a form of them actually trying to actually using critical thinking, but also using like what they define as easy for them. So I do think not everybody has it. I mean, that's facts. I want everybody has it, but can it be something that we can start inspiring kids to actually, I say kids, kids of certain ages to actually, think outside. I mean, like be free in their own creative thoughts. Let them flex their flexible ideas, and actually just, it's not bad to question something every now and then. Or it's not bad to think something that's like really, yo, dad, you're making me run around a lot. Like, why are you making me do that? Because, son, you're just something bad. And this is an understanding of it. Because, like, when we punish kids, do we ever even tell them why we do that? Because normally the thing would be like, no, you did this, so therefore you gotta get punished for it. But the thing is, you shouldn't have to go into a long-winded explanation of why we did that. Let's be real. I'm not gonna sit down and spend 12 verbal rounds with you when you're below 10 or like 14 to give you a reason why I'm doing this to you. I think by like 15, 16, I should definitely tell you. Well, not 16, but at least I think the minimum, I'll say 13 to 15. Somewhere around that time is why I'm going to give you an explanation, son. Because I feel like I've disciplined you enough to where you should understand why I'm doing this, or why you can actually sit down and ask me why I'm doing what I'm doing to you. Because, like I said, you are going to ask, like, wait, why am I doing this? Oh, well, son, simple enough. You're not meeting our expectations of what we raised you to be, and also you're not thinking for yourself. The problem, that's what the issue is. You should be able to think, be like, wow, my dad doesn't want me to do this. Therefore, let me use my own gifts, my own thoughts in order to really come to an answer of why is this happening. So, like basic understand. I sometimes I call it basic understanding, but it's not basic to them. So that's what I also could think could be a contributing factor of why they never get outside that. Dusto?
Yeah, you're muted, Dusto.
Oh, no,
Yeah,
I'm saying we
I couldn't hear
believe in balance. So there's a time where it's, hey man, do what I told you to do. And then there's
right.
a time where, hey man, it could be right after. Come here, let me holler at you for a minute. When I told you to do this, look at that over there. You see that? You was about to run across the street with this and that. There's a time, the reason it could be after, or sometimes it can be before, but there's a time where it's, hey man, do what I told you to do. I'm gonna bust you in the chest. There's a time, there is a time for that.
Those are the consequences I was talking about. You have to consider the consequences.
Yeah.
Consequences of me not doing what I was told. I get busted in the chest. You know what I'm saying? Do I want that? Do I not? Is it worth taking that risk? Is it not? Like some drills my mother used to go over with me. Like I come up with her, Mama, what about this, that, and the other? It'd be something with homework or whatever. She's like, what do you think? You tell me. You know what I'm saying? Like, what do you think it is? And she tried to put me through the process. I'm looking at it now. Like some days I wonder, I'm like, she only asked me to do that because she didn't really know. I used to think that too, but no, it helped out doing that kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like putting me through that kind of drill. What do you think? Why is that the issue? Why is this the case? You know what I'm saying? And making me think about it and answer those kind of questions. That's what I mean by like when Black Men Unfiltered came up here and said black men worked hard, but you know, saying they had all the obstacles. Yeah, I consider those obstacles, but in your house, teach your kids to think critically. Because look at people like some of our great inventors, George Washington Carver, everything he did with the peanut. You know what I'm saying? Like, if it weren't for critical thinking, we wouldn't have even a fraction of the stuff he came up with. You know what I'm saying? So critical thinking is something that can be practiced at home with your children, with your parents. You know, the parents can be doing with their children. You know, it doesn't and you can use it in many different ways in just about every aspect of your life. That's why it's so crucial, in my opinion, that we teach it and practice it. All right, Grant.
Hey, how are you guys doing?
How you doing? I'm unfamiliar with you. I think it's your first time on the platform.
I've seen them around.
Oh, yeah. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I would, when it comes to critical thinking, kind of listening to everyone, sort of, put forward their ideas. I would just say the notion of someone a great inventor, using your example of George Washington Carver, and something I've thought about isn't necessarily critical. It isn't necessarily critical thinking. Is giving young kids the idea of being creative and not stifling their creativity and being inquisitive. Because I think one of the things that I think comes out of the great inventors, this is, you can look at any society, the more willing you are to take risks, the more willing you to have a broad notion of what's possible, and you're willing to risk it all for it, even in the face of failure, you'll tend to find more success versus failure.
Mm-hmm.
And even the great leaps, correct? If you don't make it to Mars, but you make it to the moon, it still was worth it, correct? Once you get out of the atmosphere, you fundamentally change the trajectory of your society. And I do think, one of the earlier statements by Black David is that it needs to be taught in school, but it doesn't impact other groups, correct? Other groups are innovative. So schooling isn't the thing that is the capping.
What do you mean by other groups?
Other groups that are innovative, correct? If innovation or critical thinking if you can measure critical thinking. Let's say we know what critical thinking looks like, and let's just say African Americans on whole, if that's what we're putting forward, may be on the the lower end of it if you're using outcomes as a way of measuring it. And some other groups, let's say Asians or Jews, who are more likely to win Nobel Prizes, correct, in science in the case of Jews. Why as a group are they producing in mass the number of people who are winning those prizes, and African Americans on whole are not, as a general concept? Let's say we're just mapping these things out.
I got slight pushback.
Yeah, go for it.
As a whole, if we're talking test scores and certain things, yeah, you can say African Americans are at the bottom. When it comes to creativity, critical thinking in certain ways, for example, entertainment, though it's more emotion based, it's critical thinking. People are creating something and creating the market, going out and selling and pushing their albums, their music, their whatever, their image, their brand. Meaning it's not as bad off as it looks. It's just more like on an individual basis in the household, you see all kind of bloody messes.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with you on that. I was making the point
there's an imbalance in certain areas, but there's an overbalance in certain areas.
Correct.
And
so I was actually making the point of saying.
Yeah. Also, one other thing.
Yeah, go.
A lot of those who come into other countries, they're actually putting their kids more in a box than a lot of the Americans are. The Americans have people who are too far out the box. Some of them have the freedom to critically think, they just can't do it. But then there's other ones who can think and do stuff, but they're having it beat out of them.
Agreed.
I'm saying, no, you're going to be a doctor. But
I totally agree with
sports. Doctor, I'm going to beat you.
Totally agree. I wasn't making the point of saying.
No, I got you.
I was just pointing out that if school was where the problem lie, you wouldn't see all these other things happening. That to say that to fix it there would mean that other outcomes are not happening, and I just don't know if that's.
Oh, okay.
I was using something that was very tangible in the sense of like Nobel Prizes are pretty easy to sort of measure, but the reality is for me is really getting young kids out of the idea of being boxed in, correct? Making sure we are not saying no to young kids and that we're giving them a chance to explore ideas, especially when you think about the future is going to be very technical in nature, correct? It's going to be very oriented around solving very tough problems. You want kids to not sort of think that certain things are all only for other races. So something that's often said, and I know we say it jokingly, but it's like, well, that's what white people do. But why frame everything as something white people do versus what Black people do? When you can just
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, when you could just think about things of being either hard or easy, correct? We want to try it or not try it. Go ahead and do it or don't do it. If you're framing everything as something being outward that you don't want to try because it's not part of you, I think that's limiting. And I think those are sort of ways of you can strip away what we may perceive as some deficiencies in critical thinking. At least that's the way I think about it.
When someone says that's what white people do, or because I'm Black they haven't identified the problem. They didn't gather any information. Because they across the panels, which I'm gonna get into that dust question later. The people talk about this fictional place called the white community. If you go over where white people live, rich or poor, they are not together and they do what they want to do. They are not a community. They're just as out of control as Black. If you go to Hispanic Americanized, they're just as out of control. In about 2000, I think the year was, the number one rapper was white, Eminem, and the number one golfer was Black, Tiger Woods.
Yep.
What do white people do? What is this? I'm honestly, Larry Bird was an MVP in the NBA. Back in the 60s, the Celtics was the Black team that was winning. Then in the 80s, when I was watching, they were all white. What is it that these white people and these Black people are doing?
Yeah, I don't think it's a question of whether what. I mean, I can tell you.
No, I wasn't shifting it to you. I'm just talking like to the audience.
Oh, it's a rhetorical. Okay.
Just in general. Yeah. But that's people not really identifying the problem, gathering proper information. And if one black person did something that white people, whatever it is, they solved the problem. Hey, there's no tennis players. Okay, be the first black one. Whole opportunity out there for you. Big money. Look at how much money the Williams sisters made. Just saying.
That was creative. That was creative thinking, correct? I mean, that was quite genius.
Yeah. And if you gather information, if you do the research, somebody was the first black this.
Yeah, but I would only push back on the notion that you can just teach it, correct? If critical thinking was just something you get that you just know that you haven't shared, which is unlikely, that whoever is listening, correct, whoever like wouldn't turn on a light bulb for anyone if you would just say, well, teach your kids critical thinking. There are some
I got you.
There's some groups that are just better at critical thinking. This is not a white or black thing. This is mainly some groups have better outcomes than others, just as a general concept. Just extract race out of it. If you could just if you could assign it by the length of the size of a nose, you could easily just segment a group of people, and you could just say, I'm going to make these group of people. I'm going to put in all of the features that make you more critical thinkers. Correct. The point being, what are some of the deficiencies that are causing at least a larger cohort of African Americans that may not necessarily tether themselves to critical thinking?
Gotcha. The number one, it is a very good question. To be fair, brother. Okay, Grant, very good question. I would say the number one is the environment. We come from, like we went over that a little bit earlier, where we're taught to take the path of least resistance, and it was rooted in fear from decades ago, and it's something that's just been passed down from generation to generation. We haven't been historically largely taught to go to college, because once upon a time, not too long ago, we weren't even allowed to go to college. So that wasn't even an option. So what were our parents at that time supposed to tell us to do? Keep your mouth shut, your eyes closed. Go get a job at a factory somewhere. If your boss give you flack, so what? Deal with it. Just go back to work the next day. You know what I'm saying? Take the path of least resistance. The problem with that is that it's a life of mediocrity. Now, I gave some examples of how my mother would challenge me and make me think critically, but at the same time, there's kind of that same message as well. Like, don't pick a dangerous job when you get in the Army. You know what I'm saying? Like, I ended up picking one of the most dangerous jobs that you could possibly do in the Army. You know what I'm saying? But I just like being challenged. I've always been that way. But to answer your question, why some groups are better critical thinkers and the deficiencies with us, is largely environment. You look at our history here in this country, we weren't left with very many options. Critical thinking wasn't exactly a high priority on our list. It was mostly survival. No one really taught us critical thinking. We didn't know what it was 50, 60 years ago. So there's a lot of things that worked against us that kept us in a certain spot in this country and kept us from growing. Only in the past 40, 50 years or 50 years now that we were able to actually grow. In a country that was so hell-bent on keeping us held down and keeping us away from opportunities, that it's amazing that we even exist here anymore. In spite of all that, we still exist. And now you look at us, we excel. We're misguided, full of trauma, but we're still here and we excel. Other people from other countries, they get here and they do have advantages.
Yeah, I can add to it. Emotional instability or unmanaged emotions restricts critical thinking.
It does.
The need for acceptance or need to be right, like that critical need or that false need, restricts critical thinking. Mandrell says something, he's right and I'm wrong. but I don't like the way he said it. Man, where you from? Alabama? I'll be there next week. What's up? Now I'm way off track.
Way off track.
What problem am I trying to solve now? The wrong one. And I find out when I get to Alabama that he knows Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Now I got a whole nother problem. My neck is broke. But I'm off track. Or he says something, I don't want to believe it because I want to look a certain way. Man, I got all the money. I got 78 hoes. That got nothing to do with the problem. Now I'm creating more problems. So just add on and add on because you want that temporary feeling because of how you feel, your emotions. But people are being groomed this way. That the problem to them isn't really the problem. The problem is how they feel at that moment and how they look in their image and all this other fake stuff. But they're grooming it, that something's being groomed.
Yeah. So Grant, for me, that's what it is. Mostly is largely just the environment that causes some groups of people to be better critical thinkers than others. It depends on your environments, your circumstances, your upbringing, and environment does affect your upbringing. How your parents are going to, what lessons your parents are going to teach you, what kind of moral lessons you're going to learn. You know what I mean? It's largely environment, man. For me, that's the answer that I come up with.
So how do you overcome? So the question would be then how do we overcome these this idea of environment? Correct. If environment is the thing that's sort of dragging a certain cohort down, then how do you change that environment? So I'll just posit this as an idea. So let's say every Sunday, Black people go to church more often than other groups, and for whatever reason, Black churches teach a particular doctrine, whatever that doctrine is. I'm not going to necessarily get into it. Mm-hmm. But everyone leaves their church every Sunday with a similar doctrine, and they live by it, correct? And so whatever that percentage of people do it, that to me isn't an environment. So then the question would be, how do you get a group of people who are all going to a same place? I'm not saying everyone, I'm just saying a group of people who, even within that environment, you can shift the way people think, correct? The church could shift the way you think. You could look at music shifts the way people think. What things could be done in order to overcome environmental problems that could help sort of move the needle to get more kids into more critical thinking or into more problem solving?
Yeah, I think the expectation is unrealistic. You're asking a person or a small group of people to change a large group of people. And identifying the problem. The problem is massive. And there's so many factors that factor into the problem. The pulling force is very strong. Gather information. What do we know? Church became political. There's money involved. There's people. There's evil spirits. There's greed. There's need. There's gluttony. There's food. There's mental health. All of those factors, you're trying to get a small population to actually go and change. What you can do is influence change from a smaller scale, maybe get a couple of people to try to get a couple of people. But that's almost like asking me to solve police brutality. You kind of get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I was just using church as a filler, as a sort of a placeholder, not necessarily. I get the complexity of what church does or its place or role. I was just sort of as a placeholder, but but then my only pushback on that would be in the absence of saying it's not going to be one person, no reason for anyone to look for a savior. I don't believe in the notion of a savior. There shouldn't be one hero. But what can be done that you can at least move the needle by 5 percentage points or 10 percentage points? That could be a structural shift away from ideas. So if you go back and listen to African-American basketball players in the 1970s, correct? Or even football players. They probably had less access to education than African Americans today as a general concept. Yet linguistically, they sound extraordinarily, I would just say, closer linguistically to what we would consider standard English than I think some of the young men today. And I'm not knocking anyone, but you can tell that that linguistic change for African American, especially young African American boys and girls, is the advent or the proliferation of hip hop, correct? And so you see this almost immediate linguistic change for young African American boys. And what I'm just pointing out is that if you can shift that in such a narrow period, what could be done in order to shift the way people think in such a narrow space that allows for certain ideas to at least proliferate out to a group of people in a way that can be effective and make the kind of changes that you would think would be more advantageous for African Americans going forward?
I can give you a quick answer. One is critical thinking, and number two is actually the top of the top of the top. Critical thinking, as tenets of manhood, is pretty up there. Critical thinking and problem solving. The top of the top is influence. Influence can speed up the process because now people want to buy what you're selling. Just like hip hop has influence, and they say we want to dress, we want to look like this. Sports has influence. If you can find a way that people want to look and act and people want to buy what you're selling, they want to be who you are and be where you are, people will follow.
Well, hold on. Dustin, can you hear me?
Yeah.
It,
Can't see you, but I can hear you.
That's funny, dude. No. So I don't know if y'all know of this term, and hopefully Grant has heard of it. You know the term myopic?
Mm-mm.
So are you guys?
Yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah. So okay. So to me, that's very similar to certain people who like the ability to look outside their own worldview. Which I'm technically going to give it to you without actually giving you the definition, but in form of a sentence. They like the ability to look outside their own worldview. So pretty much it means a lack of foresight or imagination. And whenever you're trying to teach someone, if they're always just stuck in this quote unquote barrier, which you've kind of like buried them into, or they've kind of like adapted it from what they've been taught and not like get outside of it, they're going to be stuck in that worldview and never ever be able to find any possible measure of critical thinking, let alone to like have their own thoughts. Because it's just, what's the word you would use? It's been recycled and just, re-indoctrinated. And the more you do it, the more you make a drone. So, I mean, that's just truth on that. The more you keep doing it, the more it sounds like those old torture tapes they would make you listen to in order to get you to break. So the more you keep doing it to young children, the more you kind of like, what's the word you would use? Ring them in. Instead of us ringing you through the neck, we're ringing your head. And that's how we can wire you and program you to our fitting.
Yeah, kill the head, the rest will follow.
Smart man. It's one of the most effective means of tactics there is.
Yeah, I got a question for the panel. Mm-hmm. We're talking about trying to get the kids in line.
Yeah.
The parents ain't in line. And half of the parents are men. And the men are coming. They said, you know what? There's problems going on with relationships and money and all this stuff. So they went and they created this space called the manosphere. They created this, and it's going to solve all the problems. How do y'all feel about the problem solving in the manosphere?
What problem solving?
I would just say it's. I mean, I tend to think of the manosphere as being more of an environment of just sort of laying out grievances, correct? And I think it's problematic because it just regurgitates the ideas and the frustrations of I think men. And I think oftentimes the solutions are the subjugation of women, correct? That merely the idea that if you can control women, it will solve problems and that tends to be the panacea sort of what can solve these problems. And I think one of the difficulties within the space is I think everyone knows, at least anecdotally, reflexively, that there are clear problems that African Americans are experiencing. Some may be inflicted by sort of the structure of America, but clearly there are some self-inflicted wounds that I think both sides of the equation, I think men to some extent and women on the other extent, may not be willing to look inward as to how culpable they are or we are to the problems. And so I don't necessarily know how well this current manosphere or this iteration of it is doing around problem solving. And I think a lot of it has to do that it appeals to the more religiosity of us. It appeals to the myth-laden notions of our past. And I think it's filled with a lot of misinformation. And I think the moment that you have the level of misinformation, it's very hard for you to, or hard for us to figure out the problems when we're constantly making up what I think are some of the problems that may or may not exist.
I don't know that you call it a mental bill, but I call it a mental clown or a mental circus.
I love you for that.
I'm being visually blunt because I've listened to these so-called managers for at least 2 years without saying a word. And all I'm hearing a bunch of idiotic donut heads who've never done their homework, never done their research, make up stupid ass things, never test their logic. The moment you test their logic, they get stuck in their panties. It might be that time of the month, and yet they are far more feminine than the women they complain about. So let's stop calling them men. Let's call them mental circus from now.
Well, the thing is, you say, well, test that logic. To me, there is no logic to it. I lean more to, hold on. I lean more
call it
towards,
mental circus.
I lean more towards what Grant said. It's just a place where people come to air out grievances at this point. They blame the women. And here's the thing: if you're supposed to be a leader, well, it's the women. It's the women. It's the women. Where's your leadership?
Exactly.
Huh?
I was just about to say that.
I mean, where's your leadership? That's what I think about it. That's what I think about the manosphere. It's just like, okay, well, where's your leadership then?
What leader?
See, men are the leaders. How many of those guys?
You not white geezer?
Hold on.
Stuck in the grandma basement.
Yeah, stop getting cursed out in African first. That's what you can do. Where's your leadership, Black David? Okay. So anyway,
well, I got leadership. You call Hulk smash.
No, what I'm saying is, and everyone, I am just joking with Black David, but no, it's just they want to be leaders, but they don't really want solutions. I don't think. I think they just like talking about having solutions. They talk about leadership. They don't know how to lead. They think leadership is subjugation, that women should just do what they tell them to do just because they said to do it. And that's not at all how a marriage works, not how a relationship works. That's not how a relationship between two human beings work, romantic or otherwise. You know what I'm saying? I think a lot of people just don't know how to be in relationships. It's too much we don't know. We're not being properly taught. And this is the result. And the manosphere exposes all that, in my opinion. There's a lot of examples of what not to do and how not to be in the manosphere. I dare say there's far more of that than there is learning what to do. A lot of learning what not to do in the manosphere.
Well, Mandrell, I'll say this. I don't want to talk about the hate group. I don't care to talk about them. I will say this: if you're forging your own path, I don't need the traumas of other people to freaking use it as motivation of why I should or should not get married. All I know is that, listen, this is my life, and I'm gonna live it, and I'm gonna live it the way that I'm gonna see fit. I'm gonna face the adversity, not you. So I have to carve my own path, and not a bunch of. Oh, damn it, I don't want to. So, let me not do that because it'll be a circle. I don't want to hear a bunch of mentally disturbed patients tell me things because it's very toxic and very cancer. How I hear it, because it just fits a narrative and agenda, and I don't care for agendas really. So I'm more about authenticity, like how Mandrell is, particularly. Dusto, you have some authenticity to you because you're funny. So I'll always give you the benefit of doubt most of the time. And you smile a lot too, which I find that funny too. He's like, yeah, he's like, he's telling the truth. but I'll say this, like, like I said, just we have to be crucial in our thinking, and we have to also know when to hear one another when some good advice is told. Like the thing about me is that I'm willing to humble myself to hear what older cats have told me. I may be 31, but there's still people older than me who have lived a little bit of life and also told me, like, young blood, you haven't really lived life yet. No, despite what I've experienced and despite what I've gone through. But at the same time, I know, like I said, I haven't fully lived it until I've gotten like in the older range and actually gone through a little bit more adversity and a little bit more strife, and then actually, get out the gutter. And then after that, just like, yeah, I can. And then I'd be like, yeah, I understand what you guys are talking about. I definitely understand now. Like, like this is life. This is hard work, grinding it out. And yeah, people are going to be in your face, but guess what? Sometimes either, like I said, you got to step on them, push them out your way so that you can get to where you need to get to. And also, like, being willing to think on your own individual and not use a voice that's been whispered in your ear. In this case, speaking a language that's been whispered in your ear, like it's been programmed into you. You need to think on your own, and you need to be out there and get your feet wet. So I think that's what we more should teach to our younger boys out here, and actually, just let them be them. That's what I'm gonna. And when I say let them be them, I'm talking about let them experience the thought process away from us. Because I've always liked when I was out on my own, and I'm like, I'm learning so much, like all these new things that I didn't know, or I'm just now finally starting to think about, but also just getting experience to it. Is like, trust me, it's like a bit of a joy to it. I mean, some painkillers in it, but there's some joy to it as well. Because I think that's one of the beautiful aspects of life, is that you can go through so much and go through so many different things and learn something, and actually be like, wow, that's something I hadn't really thought about. Like, damn, that was really profound. So, just that little bit of experience always helps somebody to like change, or like really see a narrative, or more so like just see the difference of what you or what someone else was saying.
Yeah, I'll speak about it. Go ahead, Black David. Then I'll speak about it last.
Leader, but for what I've learned from my elder, leader are community builder. They build a society that can sustain themselves, pass on to the next generation, right? These so-called, I can't call them leader, these scammers on the platform act like the leader. I'm just wondering how long it would take people to realize they're being scammed for their money. They're going to go and chase their ass and kick them out of here. Because, for one, there's always been a solution to a particular problem. The problem with them, they don't want to listen. They don't make up a false ideology, think it's going to work, but at the same time, they've been scamming people forward. It's kind of amazing how a bunch of idiots who buy into their notion now realize that what they've been saying totally wrong. When people are doing the warning sign, they don't want to listen. Now they're getting caught off guard. They're getting caught out for their scamming technique. This so-called logic is not logic. According to Mandrell, it's not logic at all. It's just BS. When the real people actually talk, they got a problem with it, but they can't even test the logic of that person. I think they don't have what they call critical thinking, like you said. I think the problem is they want the same kind of people who drop out of middle school because on their level of mathematics, it's too much hard for them to understand how to find a solution. So instead, they want to cut the corner and get to the finish line. That's how I see it. But at the end of the day, I've seen all these fake Manifil jabroni Only I'm wondering when I'm gonna puke or go to another platform. I'm just saying, you know what I mean?
Yeah, we know what you
I
mean.
get you guys point. You're making a lot of sense to what really happened. And just I'm getting really sick and tired of being sick and tired of hearing junk.
Yeah, but I mean that's what we it's kind of what we left with these days. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, and again, it's because people don't know largely. They largely don't know that they're not. Again, a lot of people don't even know what critical thinking means. They think it's to criticize. It has nothing to do with criticizing anything. You may be critical of the subject after you come up with your answer. Your answer might be critical of the subject, but you're not. When you're doing critical thinking, exercising that, you're not setting out to criticize anything. You know, you're just coming up with an answer or a solution.
Yeah, Black David said something that's really important, and I'm glad you reminded me of that. I was in Alabama, and my aunt, she's a professor. She has, older than my dad. She just turned 70. And she was saying, she asked me, did I know how much damage is being done when kids are taught to go find the answers instead of doing the work? And I've been thinking about that, like, since she had told me that. And I'm just realizing how when Black David said that, that's what a lot of dudes are doing when they're coming into this space. They're just trying to go and get to the answer. So then all they hear is, get to the bag. And all right, that must be the answer. So they mark D, and then they run back out there and have the same problem. Versus actually doing the whole work and reading the whole assignment. But they're taught to do this.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't put that together.
Yeah.
Hell, I'm still learning.
I'm glad to be a help because that's something I was taught by my high school teacher.
Think about it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not willing to do the work,
doing that, they're picking 1, 2, 3 things. All right, I got it. And that's it. They're not asking the questions like, does this make sense? Does this make like I'll do this. My issue with manosphere is this. There's a problem and it's not getting solved. It's getting worse. The problem is there's a man over here and there's a woman over there and they're not connecting. So now the men are getting worse and the women are getting worse. And now they're really not connecting and they're yelling at each other and they want to beat the shit out of each other all day. It doesn't solve the problem. Then the things that they're saying are the solutions are the very problems. Well, the problem is the woman won't just listen to the man because he's a man. No, that's the very problem that created feminism. They were listening to men and ended up in ditches or ended up in the sky somewhere. So then they overcorrect and say, we ain't listening no more. Then I mentioned stuff like emotional intelligence and all they heard was emotion. And all they say is when you hear emotion, pick A, B, or C. B, simp. They hit that button, and that's all they go off of.
Or they pick C and say, B is they call you simp, and C is like, F your emotions.
And they're the one being emotional when they're saying that.
Right. It's the silliest thing. What do you mean F their emotions? You're dealing with people. You have to factor in emotion.
But they're asking for a woman who is an emotional creature. They want feminine women, but they don't want emotions.
Right. Then they want to tell them F your emotions, but you want an emotional creature. You have to take their emotions into considerations, man. I mean, hey, here's the thing. Because we're going to move on to final thoughts.
Yeah, because it's not a financial problem. The bag is
not
going to help you. It's not.
You can have all the money in the world, but I mean, your woman still cheats on you. I mean, it wasn't the money.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So, final thoughts, Black David. CBN's
final thought. I think that it's a good time for us as the people to sit down and think about the end goal. How do you want to achieve the end goal? What are you willing to do to achieve the end goal? What will it take you to achieve the end goal instead of just looking for a shortcut? What I'm looking at right now is that people are developing a lazy mentality. But they're not willing to put in the effort or the work. They want a quick scheme, get rich kind of solution so that they can get the money fast. I remember my high school teacher said, The quicker you get your money, the faster you lose it. The quicker you get to the end goal, the faster you realize that's not really the end goal to begin with. So I start to wonder, what am I trying to achieve that would worth taking the effort to get into it? And I realized, you know what? I'm going to do something that not only it will fill me up better, but I can pass down to the next generation. So I'm not going to waste my time with no low-fee idea that haven't never been tested out. The moment I ask question, went from calm to angry more in less than 3 seconds. I don't need that around me.
Okay, Mike.
That's someone coming up right now.
Okay, cool. What's the man's name? The new guy.
Grant.
Grant, my
He's
bad.
not new. I've seen him around. He's
You
cool.
see him around? Oh, okay, cool.
What floor you got to go on tomorrow?
I think it's a great topic to bring up. I think for anyone that is interested in sort of gaining the skills of being sort of critical thinking, I would say it first starts with being humble that you don't know everything, and I think having the ability to understand that there is a whole world out there of things that you don't know. And be skeptical about the things you do know, that things can change. And I think also be open to effective communication, and for yourself, learn how to be an effective communicator. The exchange of ideas allows for us to shift. It allows for us to sort of bombard our own ideas and then hopefully change them. And I think within that process, you can think through problems a little bit more clearly. So you're not necessarily relying on others to shape your thoughts. You're able to take bits and pieces of information and sort of craft a new thought. And so we've all been lucky to land here in the human experience by leveraging the previous knowledge and then tacking on more knowledge as a collective body. That has been quite useful for humans, and we should probably continue to use that as a group of people. And I think if you are really wanting to make change within yourself, pick up books. Pick up books that are going to help you sort of learn things that you don't know, and don't rely on what you heard when you were a child. Often in these spaces, I hear people talk about biology in ways that are completely untethered to any science, correct?
Yeah.
And it only takes maybe a couple of keystrokes to find out the information.
True.
And so as you gain more of those skills of researching and figuring things out, I think there's going to be a whole host of things that you're going to understand about the world, and you're less likely to rely on others to provide you the answers, because you're going to have all the skills to be able to find those answers yourself. And I think taking that approach is going to be far more beneficial to all of us. It'll be beneficial for you as an individual, but it will obviously be beneficial to African Americans in writ large, because I think the more people who are open to discovery, I think we can release the shackles of myth-laden nonsense, and we can become a much more scientific, a much more logic-driven group of people. And I do think that will unleash, I think, the kind of change I think many African Americans are looking for. And I'm hopefully optimistic that I think we can bring more and more people along this ride of being critical thinkers, and I think excellent problem solvers. Thank you.
Awesome, no problem. Thank you for coming up here, Grant.
Thanks
Appreciate
for
it.
pulling up.
Yeah.
Thanks
Thanks for coming, man.
Got a good mind.
Yeah, he does.
Then
Me
it's
more.
you.
Then it's me. You've animated speaks pulling up at the last minute at the 11th hour.
Tell us something we don't know. What's going on in these streets?
There you go.
Stop the hate. Start the date.
I'm 50-50, man. I know what you're talking about.
You know, because I was in and out of here, so I'll just say that be mentally and emotionally healthy before you get into a relationship. You do need to get to know yourself first before you try to figure out what you will and won't deal with people, not even with relationships, but people in general. You'll know what you're willing to deal with if you know yourself first. Don't be closed-minded, be open-minded. When you're open-minded, you open yourself to the world. Closed-minded, you're in a box. You're in a box, this little. So I mean, that's what I got for you.
Cool.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, Dustin, what's your final thought on tonight's subject? And I'll give mine.
My final thought is critical thinking. Number one, identify the problem. Most people have not identified what is the damn problem.
Right.
What actually really is the problem? Most of it is in the mirror. Then,
Yep.
what information? A lot of the information you're getting is garbage, it's trash, and it's a lie. It's bad. Some of the stuff I'm hearing doesn't even make sense. 1 minute you're talking about, well, there was an article that said black fathers are the most involved. And how the hell they going to happen at a 30% marriage rate? And you talk about single moms got all the kids. And then another group of people is at 70-something%, but your black father's more active. That makes sense. Huh? But they're going to keep running that narrative. Go on, keep believe that. But gather the right information. Know what it's talking about. All the women want 6-figure, 6-pack, 666. 60-something% of them got a kid.
666 is devil.
Yeah, but 66% about have a child. And that man doesn't own Microsoft. Therefore, some of the stuff you're hearing ain't true. Do some critical thinking. Go look around. Go to the mall. Go look around. Possible solutions. Now, here's the point where you get the men to disappear. You say the word solution, you'll hear people start scattering, running. Because they didn't want that. Now I'm finding out, thanks to Black David, rung another bell of mine, they just want the quick answer. Protect, provide, and the bag. Dude, you make $38,000 a year. You just broke as you were last year. And you're ugly. You got the same, now you got another problem. And your attitude garbage. And you're running out here with these talking points. You ain't high value. You stink. And then I got to come up here and troll you. Now you got that problem too. Because you decided not to listen. Solve the damn problems. But first identify them and say, hey, you know what? I got a problem. Me, for example, I had a problem with emotional intelligence in 2019. I took a class. I realized I'm the problem. 2020, I took another class. And I said, I'm not going to be the same person anymore. I started listening, question, listen, observe. I ain't that person no more.
Yeah. But open-minded person is going to do exactly what you did.
Yeah.
You have to be open.
Yeah. I'm just saying. But that's all I got. Solve the problems or get trolled. It's y'all's choice. I mean, we can do this.
Yeah. And my final thoughts is you have to ask questions. You have to figure out why something's going on. Without the why, you can never solve it. And you're going to keep running into this same issue over and over and over again. And when you do your critical thinking, do not be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, because if you're not making mistakes, you're not making decisions. You're going to make mistakes. Lord knows I do. You know what I'm saying? We all do. We all mess up. Just like Dusto, I had a problem with emotional intelligence.
And you're ugly.
And I'm ugly. So what did I do? I took look. Even just this year alone, I've taken several classes on emotional intelligence. several of them. I've taken classes on active listening, effective communication. I made a conscious decision to not be the same person that I was anymore.
He's still ugly.
According to him.
I told you to change. I told you to change your face. You didn't listen.
That's too expensive. I'd rather ride with what I got.
Oh, well, I understand. Price is going up on faces.
Yeah. You know, getting to the bag don't really do nothing. So, I mean.
Oh, my goodness.
You know. So, yeah, people, I made a conscious decision to be better. And, you know, that's what you have to do. Critically thinking. Like Dusso said, discover the problem. Are you clear on my issue? My thing is, are you clear on what the problem is? Number 2, ask yourself, what do I know? Number 3, ask yourself, what do I not know? 4, what information do I still need? 5, what is the context of the issue? That's crucial. Consider all possibilities and think it through. You're not going to get anywhere with quick solutions. It's just not going to happen.
No, right.
You know what I mean? So, like I said, I'll lean back on this. If you're not making mistakes, you're not making decisions. You're going to make mistakes. You can't be afraid to take chances. Critical thinking, it's an absolute must to have in your life. It ties into the tenets of manhood. It ties into stoicism. It ties into all of that. It's an absolute must. Required. You know, and I think everyone should start trying to practice it. You know, it'll save you from a lot of drama, a lot of bad decisions that are being made. And you'll be all the better for it. These are just habits that you and understand that you're not going to get it right every time. You're not. So if you miss it here and there, cool. It's not the end of the world. We all miss it sometimes. We do. You know, as long as you're making a conscious effort to practice these new habits, you'll keep moving forward. And that's it. Thank you for joining us this weekend. Join us next week. See y'all later.
Good night, people. Dust. Black David.
Back in it, baby, to stay in a town. I'm on the edge, I ain't coming down. I get too high, I'm afraid of the ground. I'm young and I'm paid to play with these sounds. Ignoring the call, she shutting that gown. Started at the top, and I'm taking it down off the champagne. Took a break from the brown on a rampage. I've been giving it brown. Shawty been solid some time now. On my line for the wine, dine, and I'm with it. Look where we started and look where we at. I can see where we headed, but I can't see me finish. 3 years ago, I was down on my last. Was stuck at the crib, I couldn't get out of my bed. Then I realized it's all in my head. And I can't go back to the past, yeah. Except now I'm moving, put all in the music for more like a movement is brewing. I cannot picture us losing. I'm sharp when I shoot it, the world is my tutor. She wanna lip lock in public, but know that I'm published, we settle for safety. Not in the street, but I'm on the same muscle, that schedule been driving her crazy. They talk like they know me, but know that they bluffing unless it's somebody that pays me. Keep minding your business, the money been printed, my nigga just gotta go get it. I'm in the zone through the winter. I'm trying to see Rome, see Venice. I'm at the summit, I'm thumbing